for 3 years. That $480,000 was the only wall between me and my suffocating family. I checked the balance monthly just to feel safe, but at 7 in the morning on a gray Tuesday, the screen didn't show my future. It flashed two bright red words, "Access denied." I assumed it was a glitch, never suspecting that my mother had just walked into a bank and authorized the theft of my life. The morning light in Larkspur Harbor usually felt like a promise, but on this particular Tuesday, it felt more like an interrogation. At 33 years old, I had structured my life around manageable, bite-sized anxieties. I worried about the client load at Seabright Clinical Billing Group, where I managed a team of 6. I worried about the transmission on my 10-year-old sedan. I worried about whether the divorce had left a permanent, invisible mark on my forehead that everyone except me could see. But I did not worry about money. Not really. Not in the way that kept you awake at 3 in the morning staring at the ceiling fan. I had a secret. One that sat quietly in a high-yield account I had not touched in 3 years. $480,000. It was the remains of a trust fund left to me by my grandfather, a man who had understood the specific, suffocating gravity of the Reed family better than anyone. He had bypassed my parents completely, leaving the principal to me with a stipulation that I gain full control at age 30. That money was not for vacations. It was not for clothes. It was my exit strategy. After my marriage imploded and I lost the house in the settlement, that trust fund became my psychological anchor. It was the down payment on the modest condo I was looking at near the marina. It was the reason I could sleep at night. I sat at my small kitchen table, the one I had bought secondhand when I moved into this rental apartment, and sipped lukewarm coffee. The routine was always the same. Check work email, check the weather, check the bank. I opened the banking app on my phone. My thumb hovered over the biometric scanner. A reflex I had performed 1,000 times. The little circle spun. Usually, the dashboard would load in 2 seconds, displaying the comforting 6-figure balance that reminded me I was independent. Today, the screen went black for a heartbeat. Then, a red box appeared. Access denied. I frowned. Tapping the refresh icon, it was probably the Wi-Fi. My building had terrible connectivity in the mornings when everyone was getting ready for work. I switched to data and tried again. The circle spun. The red box returned. Access denied. Contact administrator. A cold prickle of irritation started at the base of my neck. I did not have time for technical glitches. I had a department meeting at 9 and a stack of denied claims to review. I closed the app completely, swiping it away, and reopened it. I decided to type in my password manually, just in case the fingerprint reader was acting up. I typed it in carefully. Renora_88. The screen flashed. Invalid credentials. I stared at the phone. That was impossible. I had not changed my password in 6 months. I tried again. Slower this time. Sounding out the characters in my head. Invalid credentials. Account locked. Then the text message came through. It buzzed against the wood of the table. A violent little sound in the quiet kitchen. Seabright security alert. Your credentials were updated successfully at 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If this was not you, please contact support immediately. The irritation vanished, replaced instantly by a hollow, sickening drop in my stomach. 4 in the morning, I had been asleep. My phone had been on the nightstand. I did not finish my coffee. I dialed the support number on the back of my debit card, my fingers trembling just enough to make me misdial the first time. I forced myself to breathe. It was fraud. It had to be fraud. Someone had hacked the database. It happened all the time. The bank would fix it. They would freeze it, investigate, and restore it. That was what banks did. The hold music was a tinny, upbeat orchestral loop that made me want to throw the phone across the room. I paced the length of my small kitchen, 7 steps from the fridge to the window. 7 steps back. Finally, a voice clicked on. Marlin and Wove Private Wealth. This is Sarah. How can I help you today? My voice sounded tight, higher than usual. I am locked out of my account. I said, I got a text saying my credentials were updated at 4 this morning. I did not update them. One moment, Ms. Reed, Sarah said. Her voice was calm, professional. The voice of someone who had never had $480,000 vanish. Let me pull up your file. Can you verify your full address and the last 4 digits of your social? I gave her the information. I heard typing, long, rhythmic typing. I see the update here. Sarah said, it looks like a profile reset was processed early this morning. It was not me. I said, gripping the phone. I was sleeping. You need to freeze the account. There was a pause. The typing stopped. Ms. Reed. This does not look like an external hack, Sarah said, her tone shifting slightly. It is flagged as a client-authorized profile update. It was initiated with a secondary verification code sent to the file on record. I do not have a secondary verification code. I said, I use my thumbprint. The system shows the authorization came through a verified channel, she said. It notes that the request was validated by the family contact listed on the priority file. I stopped pacing. I stood perfectly still in the center of my kitchen. Family contact? I whispered. Yes, Sarah said. We have a standing authorization form from 2015 that lists additional communication contacts for emergency account management. The update was verified through that channel. 2015. I was 22 years old then. I had just graduated college. I remembered sitting in my parents' living room, signing a stack of papers my father had put in front of me. Just standard stuff. Nora, in case something happens to you, in case you get into an accident, who? I asked. The word felt like a stone in my throat. Who authorized the change? I cannot give specific details on the other party without a subpoena if there is a dispute, Sarah said, retreating into corporate policy. But the log shows it was an in-person request at a local branch, overridden by the priority contact status. In person. At 4 a.m? The request was processed by the system at 4. Sarah corrected. The submission was likely entered yesterday during business hours. My parents lived in Briar Glen, 40 minutes away. There was a Marlin and Wove branch in their town. Freeze it, I said. My voice was shaking now. I am the account holder. I am telling you to freeze it. I can put a temporary hold on outgoing wire transfers, Sarah said, but I cannot lock out a verified user who has valid credentials without a fraud investigation, which takes 48 hours. If the secondary contact has valid power of attorney or authorization on file, they have rights to the account profile. They do not have power of attorney. I snapped. They are just contacts. I see a document here scanned in 2015 that suggests otherwise. Sarah said, it is titled, Clerical Authority and Oversight. The room seemed to tilt. Clerical authority. It sounded like something you gave a secretary. Not permission to loot a life savings. Freeze the transfers. I said, do it now. Done. Sarah said, is there anything else? I hung up. I stood there for a full minute, the silence of the apartment pressing in on me. My hands were cold. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My parents. It did not make sense. They had money. They lived in a large colonial house in Briar Glen. My father drove a luxury sedan. My mother wore cashmere and sat on the board of the local library. They were critical. Yes, they were controlling. Absolutely. They had made my divorce a nightmare of, I told you so, and if you had just listened to us. But they were not thieves. Were they? I looked at the time. 8:15. I called my boss at Seabright. I have a family emergency. I told him, I will be late. Maybe out for the day. Everything okay? Nora? He asked. I do not know yet. I said, I grabbed my purse and my keys. I did not change out of my work blouse. Though I was wearing jeans, I needed to see their faces. I needed to see them look me in the eye and tell me this was a mistake. The drive to Briar Glen was a blur of highway gray and autumn red. I drove entirely on muscle memory, taking the curves of the connector route faster than I should have. My mind was racing, replaying every interaction I had with them over the last 6 months. Had there been signs? They had been inviting me to dinner more often. Sunday nights, roast chicken and interrogation. How is the job? Nora? Are you saving money? You know, renting is essentially throwing cash into a fire. You really should let Dad look at your portfolio. I had always deflected. I'm fine, Mom. I have it handled. I had never told them the balance. Never. But they knew the trust existed. They knew Grandfather had left it. It was the elephant in the room at every holiday. The one thing they could not touch. I pulled into the driveway of the house I had grown up in. It looked painfully perfect. The hedges were trimmed into sharp, geometric lines. The white siding gleamed. It was a house that demanded you wipe your feet before you even thought about entering. My father's car was in the driveway. He should have been at his office by now. He was a consultant for regional logistics firms, a job I never fully understood, but one that seemed to involve a lot of golf and phone calls. I got out of the car. The air here smelled different than in Larkspur Harbor. It smelled of wood smoke and damp leaves and old money. I unlocked the front door with my key. I still had one. They had never asked for it back, mostly because taking it back would admit that I was actually an adult who lived elsewhere. Mom? Dad? I called out. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I walked into the kitchen. My mother, Marilyn, was standing by the island, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. She was wearing a silk blouse and her hair was perfectly coiffed. She looked up as I entered, and her smile was instant. It was too bright. It was the smile she wore when neighbors were watching. "Nora," she said, "what a lovely surprise. We did not expect you until Sunday." She did not ask why I wasn't at work. She did not ask why I looked pale. "Where is Dad?" I asked. "He is in the study," she said, trimming a stem with a sharp snap of her shears. "He took the morning off. Just some paperwork to catch up on. Do you want coffee?" I just made a fresh pot. I walked right up to the island. I placed my hands flat on the granite counter. "Why can't I access my trust fund?" "Mom?" Marilyn paused. She set the shears down very carefully. She did not look shocked. She looked patient. It was a look that made me want to scream. "Oh, Nora," she sighed. "Is that what this is about? We thought the bank would have called you to explain the transition." "Transition?" I repeated. "It is my money. What transition?" My father walked into the kitchen then. He was wearing a polo shirt and slacks, holding a folder. He stopped when he saw me. His eyes flicked to my mother, then back to me. He looked tired. The skin around his eyes was loose, gray. "You're here early," he said. "What did you do?" I asked him. "Nora, please, lower your voice." My mother said, "We are not shouting. We are simply helping you." "Helping me?" I let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "You hacked my account. You locked me out." "We did not hack anything," my father said, walking over to stand beside my mother. "We utilized a provision in the original setup, the clerical authority clause. It allows family oversight if the beneficiary is showing signs of instability." "Instability?" I stared at them. "I have a job. I have a life. I am 33 years old." "You are divorced." "Nora," my mother said softly. Her voice was dripping with that toxic sweetness. "You are living in a rental apartment. You are barely making ends meet. We know how hard it has been for you since David left." "David did not leave," I said, my voice trembling. "I kicked him out, and I am not barely making ends meet. I am buying a condo. Or I was, until this morning." "That is exactly the point," my father said. He placed the folder on the counter. "Buying a condo now? In this market? It is a terrible investment. You are emotional. Nora, you are making rash decisions. We just want to make sure the principal is protected until you are clearer. Protected." I said. "You transferred it. Where did you move it?" "We moved it to a managed sub-account." My mother said, "Under the family umbrella. It is still yours. Darling, we are just holding the keys for a little while, just until things settle down." I looked at them, really looked at them. They stood there, united, a wall of reasonable, parental concern. But there was something else. My father's hand was tapping against the counter. A fast, nervous rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. "You assumed I would just accept this." I said. "You thought I would wake up, see the money gone, and just say, 'Oh well, Mom and Dad know best'? We thought you would be relieved," my mother said. You do not have to stress about the money anymore. We will manage things properly. We have a new advisor. He is wonderful. He says this structure is much more tax efficient. Who is he? I asked. Grant, my father said. Grant Holloway. He is very sharp. He handled the timing perfectly. Timing. The word hung in the air. What timing? I asked. My father blinked. He looked like he had bitten his tongue. The market timing. He stammered. For the reinvestment. No. I said, you said he handled the timing perfectly. You mean the timing of taking the money before I could use it for the condo? Or the timing of something else? Nora, you are being paranoid, my mother said, stepping forward to touch my arm. I flinched away. Don't, I said. This is theft. I said, I am going to the police. My mother's face hardened. The mask of concern slipped, revealing the steel underneath. You will do no such thing, she said. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that would be? Dragging family business into the public eye? We are your parents. Nora, we raised you. We paid for your college. We supported you when that husband of yours turned out to be a loser. You owe us a little trust. I owe you? I whispered. That money was from grandfather. He left it to me because he knew you would do this. He knew you couldn't stand not controlling every single penny in this family. Your grandfather was a senile old man who didn't understand finance. My father snapped. His voice was sudden and harsh. He let that money sit in a stagnant account for years. It was rotting there. We are putting it to work. Putting it to work for who? I asked. For me? Or for you? My father's face flushed red. How dare you? I looked at the folder on the counter. It was thick. Marlin and Wove branding. Show me the statements, I said. If it is in a sub-account for me, show me the balance. My mother put her hand on the folder. We will review everything at dinner on Sunday, she said firmly. When you are calm, right now, you are hysterical. Go home. Nora, go to work. Let us handle the heavy lifting. She looked at me like I was 12 years old and had scraped my knee. Dismissive. Absolute. I realized then that there was no reasoning with them. They did not see me as a person. They saw me as an asset, a rogue asset that needed to be reacquired. I backed away. You are going to regret this, I said. I turned and walked out. I heard my mother calling my name, telling me to stop being dramatic. But I did not stop. I got into my car, my hands shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove 2 streets over and pulled into a cul-de-sac to breathe. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel. I felt sick, physically sick. They had done it. They had actually done it. And the terrifying part was how prepared they were. They had the paperwork. They had the narrative. Nora is unstable. Nora is emotional. I drove back to Larkspur Harbor in silence. The radio was off. The world outside the window seemed gray and flat. When I got back to my apartment, it was afternoon. I had missed 3 calls from work. I ignored them. I sat down at my computer. I needed to find the origin. I went into my email archive. I searched for grandfather. I searched for trust. I found it. An email from 7 years ago. From Arthur Vance, my grandfather's attorney. He had passed away 2 years ago. But his words were still there, glowing on the screen. Subject: regarding trust provisions and independence. Dear Nora, your grandfather asked me to send this to you when the trust formally vested. He wanted to ensure you understood that this capital is yours and yours alone. He was concerned about family pressure. He specifically instructed that you never sign any convenience documents or powers of attorney that might grant commingling of assets. The trust is structured to be separate. Keep it that way. If anyone asks you to sign a clerical update, refuse. I read the email 3 times. Clerical update, the exact phrase my father had used. Clerical authority. They had been planning this for years. They had been waiting for a moment of weakness. Or maybe they just got tired of waiting. I picked up my phone and called Jillian. Jillian Park had been my best friend since sophomore year of college. She was the only person who knew the full extent of my parents' controlling nature. She was a project manager for a construction firm, and she approached friendship with the same architectural rigor. "Nora?" She answered on the first ring. "You're at work?" "No." I said, "I'm at home. Jill. They took it." "What? Who took what?" "My parents." I said, "They accessed the trust. It's gone. Locked." I told her everything. The app, the call to Sarah, the visit to Briar Glen, the folder, the way my mother had touched my arm and told me I was hysterical. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. "Okay," Jillian said. Her voice was deadly calm. "Listen to me very carefully. Nora, do not go back there. Do not call them and scream. Do not send them angry texts. I want to scream." I said, "I want to burn their house down." "I know," she said, "but you can't, because right now, they are building a case that you are mentally unstable. That is their play. If you act crazy, you prove them right. You validate the protective transfer. So what do I do?" I asked. I felt tears pricking my eyes for the first time. I felt so small. "You go cold," Jillian said. "You go ice cold. You document everything. Write down every word they said in that kitchen while it is fresh. Every look, every slip-up. You said your dad mentioned timing? Write that down. He said the advisor handled the timing perfectly." I said, "Good." Jillian said, "That implies premeditation. That implies a strategy. Families like yours, Nora, they rewrite history. By tomorrow, your mother will have convinced herself she did it to save you from a cult. You need the facts fixed in ink." I grabbed a notebook. I started writing. "And you need a lawyer," Jillian added. "A real one. Not the family friend your dad plays golf with. I can't afford a retainer if I can't access the trust." I said, "My checking account has maybe $2,000 in it." "Then you go to legal aid," she said. "You go to someone who hates bullies." I hung up and spent the next hour typing. I typed a formal letter to Marlin and Wove Private Wealth. To the compliance department. I, Nora Reed, am the sole beneficiary of trust account ending in 4922. I am writing to formally dispute the unauthorized access and profile change that occurred on January 27th. I did not authorize this change. Any clerical authority documents are being contested. I demand a full preservation of all access logs, phone recordings, and surveillance footage regarding this transaction. I am retaining counsel. Sincerely, Nora Reed. I sent it via certified mail and email. Then I looked up Haven Ridge Legal Aid and Referral. It was a clinic in downtown Larkspur. Known for handling messy civil disputes for people who fell through the cracks. It wasn't a glossy high-rise firm. It was exactly what I needed. I called them, "Haven Ridge. This is reception. I need an urgent consultation," I said, "regarding a trust dispute and potential elder financial abuse, or, I guess it's not elder abuse if I'm the victim. Financial abuse. Can you come in tomorrow at 10? I will be there." I said. I hung up the phone. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows across my apartment. I hadn't eaten all day. My stomach nodded. But my head was clearing. I looked at the blank screen of my banking app one last time. Access denied. My parents thought they had grounded me. They thought they had taken away my power by taking away my money. They thought I would come crawling back to the safety of their control, apologizing for being difficult, grateful for their help. They had forgotten one thing. I had spent 33 years learning how to survive them. I knew how to be quiet. I knew how to hide. And now, I knew how to fight. I closed my laptop. I went to the fridge and took out a bottle of water. I stood in the dark kitchen and drank it, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. This wasn't a family dispute. This was a heist, and I was going to catch them. The office of Stonebridge and Marquez was located on the third floor of a brick building that smelled faintly of lemon polish and stale coffee. It was not the kind of glass-walled fortress my parents' friends hired, the kind where the receptionists looked like models and the water came in imported glass bottles. This place was functional. It was a place where people came when their lives were leaking and they needed a plumber, not an architect. I sat in a leather chair that had softened with age, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. Across the desk, Elena Marquez read through the printouts I had brought her. She was younger than I expected, perhaps 40, with sharp eyes and hair pulled back in a severe bun that suggested she did not have time for nonsense. She read in silence for a long time, turning the pages with a rhythmic snap that sounded like a metronome counting down my dwindling patience. Finally, she looked up. "You have a problem, Nora," she said. Her voice was dry, lacking the soothing cadence of a therapist or the artificial warmth of a customer service rep. It was the voice of a mechanic looking at a blown engine. "I know I have a problem," I said. "My parents stole my trust fund." Elena shook her head slightly. "No, technically, they have not stolen it yet. They have moved it. There is a legal distinction, and that distinction is currently the only thing keeping you from being completely underwater." She leaned back, tapping a pen against the desk. "Here is how trusts like this work," she continued. "Your grandfather set up a restricted access trust. That means the money is yours. But the institution holding it, Marlin and Wove, has a fiduciary duty to protect the asset from fraud, coercion, or incapacity if someone, say, a concerned parent, presents evidence that the beneficiary is mentally unstable or making erratic financial decisions. The firm is obligated to pause access while they verify the claim. It is called a verification freeze. It is designed to stop an elderly person from sending their life savings to a scammer. But in this case, it is being used to stop you from accessing your own money. So they can just lock me out because my mother walked in and said I was crazy? I asked, the anger flaring up again, hot and sharp in my chest. If she had the right paperwork? Yes, Elena said. And if she had an insider helping her navigate the compliance protocols? Banks are bureaucracies. Nora, they run on checklists. If your parents ticked the right boxes, instability, addiction, undue influence, the system automatically locks the doors to protect the liability of the bank. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a draft letter. "We are not going to sue them yet," she said. "If we file a lawsuit today, your parents will hire a defense team that costs more than your annual salary, and they will drag this out for 2 years while your money sits frozen. Instead, we are going to scare the bank." She pointed to the header of the letter. "This is a preservation demand," Elena said. "We are sending this to the General Counsel of Marlin and Wove. We are demanding the immediate preservation of all access logs, security footage, phone recordings, internal emails, and metadata related to your account profile change. We are putting them on notice that if a single email is deleted, they are liable for spoliation of evidence." "Will that get my money back?" I asked. "No," Elena said, "but it will turn on the lights. Cockroaches hate the light. If there is an employee at that bank who bent the rules for your parents, this letter will make them very nervous. And nervous people make mistakes." I signed the engagement letter right there. I did not care about the cost. I had $2,000 in my checking account, and I would spend every cent of it to stop them. When I left the office, the air outside felt heavier. Larkspur Harbor was usually a town of breezy coastal charm, but today the quaint storefronts and manicured planters looked like a stage set hiding something rotten. I walked to my car, my mind racing. Elena had told me to avoid direct confrontation, to let the letter do the work, but I needed to see them, not my parents, the bank. I drove straight to the local branch of Marlin and Wove. It was a sleek, modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows and a lobby that looked more like an art gallery than a place of business. I had been here only a handful of times, usually just to sign annual tax documents. I pushed through the heavy glass doors. The air conditioning was set to a brisk 68 degrees. It was silent, save for the low hum of expensive ventilation and the soft clicking of keyboards. A receptionist looked up. She was young, with a polished, eager smile that faltered the moment I reached the desk. "I am Nora Reed," I said. "I need to speak to the compliance officer." The receptionist blinked. Her eyes darted to a screen to her left, then back to me. The smile vanished completely. "Oh," she said, "you are here for the Reed family transfer issue?" The words hung in the air like smoke. The Reed family transfer. It wasn't Nora's account issue. It wasn't a technical error. It was a titled event. It was something they had discussed in the break room. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The receptionist flinched, realizing her mistake. She stammered, her face flushing a deep crimson. Regarding the profile update. Let me see who is available." She picked up her phone and whispered something I couldn't hear. I looked past her, into the open-plan office behind the glass partition. I saw a young man in a blue shirt, a junior associate I vaguely recognized, look up at the sound of my name. His face went pale. He didn't just look surprised. He looked terrified. He immediately turned his chair away, pretending to dig through a file cabinet. They know. I thought, they all know. A moment later, a heavy oak door opened, and a woman in a gray suit stepped out. She did not smile. She looked like a person who managed disasters for a living. "Ms. Reed," she said, "I am Sylvia Tate, Senior Compliance Officer. Please, come with me." She led me into a small, soundproofed conference room. There were no windows here, just recessed lighting and a polished mahogany table. She did not offer me water. She did not offer me a seat. Though I took one anyway. "I want my access restored." I said, "Now, Ms. Reed," Sylvia said, folding her hands on the table. "As you were informed by our support center, the account is currently under administrative review due to conflicting instructions regarding authorization. There are no conflicting instructions." I said, "There is me, the owner, and there are two people who are not the owners." Sylvia sighed. She looked tired. She looked like someone who was cleaning up a mess she hadn't made. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping. "Ms. Reed, I am not supposed to discuss internal personnel matters with you," she said. "But I can tell you that the directive to update your credentials and restrict your view came from a specific advisor." "Who?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Grant Holloway," she said. The name my father had mentioned. Grant handled the timing perfectly. He flagged the account as high risk. Sylvia continued. He submitted an urgency addendum, claiming that he had received verbal confirmation of standing family approvals to protect the assets from imminent dissipation. Imminent dissipation. I repeated, "They told him I was going to blow the money?" "He claimed you were in a mental health crisis," Sylvia said quietly, "and that the parents were intervening to prevent financial self-harm. He pushed the update through the priority channel at 4:55 yesterday afternoon, just before the close of business." I sat back, the leather chair creaking. Grant Holloway. I didn't know him. I had never met him, but he had listened to my parents, taken their word over the legal documentation, and executed a digital heist before the clock ran out. "Is he here?" I asked. "Can I see him?" "He is out of the office today," Sylvia said. Conveniently, she stood up. "Ms. Reed, I have received the preservation letter from your attorney. It arrived by fax 10 minutes ago. We are complying. But you need to understand something. Grant Holloway is a top producer for this firm. He brings in millions of dollars in assets. The management will protect him unless you have absolute proof that he acted with malice. If this is just a family misunderstanding, the bank will side with the advisor who is trying to protect the capital. It is not a misunderstanding." I said, standing up to meet her gaze, "It is a crime." Sylvia looked at me for a long moment. There was a flicker of something in her eyes. Pity, perhaps, or maybe just resignation. "Then you had better find the paper trail," she said, "because Grant is very good at paperwork." I walked out of the bank with my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt exposed. The junior staffer was still pretending to file papers as I passed. The receptionist wouldn't meet my eyes. I drove home, the silence of the car amplifying the noise in my head. I needed to think. I needed to remember. When I got to my apartment, I went straight to the closet where I kept my old tax returns and legal documents. I pulled down a plastic bin and dumped the contents onto the living room floor. 2015, the year the standing authorization was supposedly signed. I sifted through the papers, old leases, student loan statements, and then I remembered it. It was the summer after graduation. I was living at home for 3 months before moving to Chicago for my first real job. My father had come into my room one evening with a thick envelope. "Nora, honey, we need to tidy up some of the estate planning stuff," he had said. "Since you are moving away, we need to make sure we can handle your mail or any tax things that come up here." He had called it a beneficiary update packet. I remembered sitting at my desk, feeling that familiar prickle of suffocation. I remembered reading the first page, which gave them permission to open my mail. I had signed that one, but then there were other pages about joint oversight and investment proxy. I remembered handing the packet back to him. I signed the mail thing. "Dad, but I'm not signing the rest." He had frowned. "It is just for emergencies." "Nora, don't be difficult." "I am not being difficult." I had said, "I am being an adult. I will manage my own investments." He had stood there for a long time, holding the papers. Then he had smiled. A tight, thin smile. "Fine." He had said, "Have it your way." He had taken the packet and walked out. I sat on the floor of my apartment, staring at the wall. I had refused to sign. I knew I had refused. But what if I hadn't read everything? What if I had signed a blank page at the back? Or worse, what if they had taken my signature from the mail authorization form, the one I did sign, and lifted it? I grabbed my phone and called Jillian. "I need you to come over." I said, "I need to build a timeline." Jillian arrived 40 minutes later with a bottle of wine and a stack of legal pads. She didn't hug me. She knew I was in a place where physical contact would make me shatter. She just sat down at my kitchen table and uncapped a pen. "Okay," she said, "let's work backward. When did the behavior change?" I paced the kitchen. "About 6 months ago." I said, "Right after the divorce was final." "What did they do?" Jillian asked. "Be specific." "They started inviting me to dinner every Sunday." I said, "Before that, it was once a month. Suddenly, it was every week. And they were nice." "Nice how?" "Attentive." I said, "They asked questions. Lots of questions. Not the usual criticism. They asked about my job. They asked about the settlement with David. Did they ask about the condo?" "Yes," I said, stopping in my tracks. "My mother asked about it constantly." "Have you found a place yet? How much are the down payments these days? Interest rates are so high." "Nora, are you sure you can afford it?" I thought she was just being negative, but she wasn't. She was stress testing my liquidity. She was trying to figure out when I would need the cash. "What else?" Jillian asked, writing furiously. "They started making comments about my apartment." I said, "Little digs. This place is so small. The neighborhood isn't safe. You know, your old room is just sitting there empty. You could move back for a year. Save some money. We would love to have you." Jillian looked up. "They wanted you under their roof," she said. "If you were living in their house, it would be harder for you to notice mail from the bank. It would be harder for you to meet with lawyers. They were trying to contain you physically before they contained you financially." I felt a chill run down my spine. It was so calculated. It wasn't just greed. It was a campaign. And then there was the instability narrative. I said, every time I got upset about the divorce or complained about work, my mother would say, "Oh, Nora, you sound so manic. You sound so overwhelmed. Maybe you should see someone." She wasn't comforting me. I realized she was building a witness list. She was planting the seeds so that later she could tell people. "We have been worried about Nora's mental state for months." Jillian ripped the page off the legal pad and stuck it to the wall. "Okay," she said. "So we have motive, we have opportunity, and we have the timeline of the setup, but we are missing the trigger. Why now? Why this week?" "Because I found a condo." I said, "I told them on Sunday. I told them I was putting an offer in on Wednesday. That was the deadline." Jillian said, "If you put an offer in, you would have moved the money. They had to strike before you drained the account." My phone buzzed on the table. I looked at the screen. Evan, my younger brother. He lived in Boston, 2 hours away. He was the golden child, the one who never argued, The one who floated through life on a cloud of our parents' approval. Put it on speaker, Jillian whispered. I tapped the screen. Evan? Nora. His voice sounded tinny and breathless, like he was walking fast. I heard about what happened. You mean you heard Mom and Dad rob me? I said, Don't say that. Evan said quickly. Don't use words like that. What word would you prefer? Evan? Relocated? Liberated? Nora. Listen to me, he said. His voice dropped. I can't talk long. I wanted to tell you to be careful. Careful of what? They are not panicking. Nora. The line went silent for a second. What does that mean? I asked. I talked to Dad an hour ago. Evan said, I thought he would be freaking out because you went to the bank. But he wasn't. He was calm. He was laughing. Nora, laughing? He said it is all handled. He said the structure is bulletproof. Structure? I asked. What structure? Evan hesitated. I could hear traffic in the background. I don't know the details, he said. But they are convinced they are legally in the right. They think they are saving you, or at least, that is what they are telling themselves. But Nora people don't set up things this complex just to help their daughter. This isn't normal. Evan, what do you know? I pressed. I have to go, he said. Just don't sign anything they send you. Not even a birthday card. The line went dead. I looked at Jillian. She was staring at the phone, her face pale. They are not panicking because they think they are right. She repeated slowly. That is the scariest thing he could have said. Why? I asked. Because amateurs panic, Jillian said. People who steal on impulse panic. If they are calm, it means they have been coached. It means they have a shield. The next morning, I was back in Elena Marquez's office. I hadn't slept. The echo of Evan's warning was still ringing in my ears. Elena looked grim. She had a stack of documents on her desk. We got the initial response from the bank, she said. They are claiming the freeze is standard procedure, but my paralegal found something else. She turned her computer monitor so I could see it. When money leaves an account, it has to go somewhere. Elena said, usually, in these family dispute cases, the parents move it to their own joint checking account. They mix it with their grocery money. It is messy and easy to trace. She pointed to a line on the screen. A transaction record. Your parents didn't do that. They transferred the entire balance, $480,000, to a corporate entity. I squinted at the screen. Reed Harbor Holdings, LLC. I have never heard of that company. I said, neither had I. Elena said, so I looked it up. It was formed 3 weeks ago in Delaware. Delaware? My parents have never been to Delaware. It is a shell, Elena said. A holding company. And look at the mailing address. She pointed to the bottom of the document. 1400 Commerce Way. Suite 404, Larkspur Harbor, Connecticut. I know that building. I said, it is the strip mall near the highway, next to the dry cleaner. I drove past it this morning. Elena said, Suite 404 isn't an office. Nora, it is a rented mailbox at a shipping center. I sat back, the breath leaving my lungs. A limited liability company, a rented mailbox, a Delaware registration. This isn't my mother being controlling, I whispered. My mother barely knows how to use Venmo. She doesn't know how to register a Delaware LLC? Exactly, Elena said. This isn't emotional. This is professional. Someone built this vehicle for them. Someone told them exactly how to create a corporate entity to hide the assets so that even if you sue them personally, the money is shielded inside the company. Grant Holloway? I asked. Maybe, Elena said. But advisors usually stop at the bank transfer. Setting up an LLC? That requires a lawyer, or a fixer. She tapped the screen. We are not dealing with overprotective parents anymore. Nora, we are dealing with a structured financial maneuver. Your parents are the face of it, but they are not the architects. I looked at the name on the screen again. Reed Harbor Holdings. It sounded so legitimate. It sounded like a legacy, but it was just a box designed to imprison my future. Who? I asked. Who would help them do this? I don't know yet. Elena said. But we are going to find out, and when we do, we are going to burn their little paper castle to the ground. I walked to the window of the law office and looked out at the street below. People were walking by, drinking coffee, laughing. They had no idea that you could be erased by the people who gave you life. They had no idea that love could be weaponized into a legal strategy. Evan was right. They weren't panicking. They were following a script. And I realized then that I had been playing the wrong game. I had been playing the role of the hurt daughter. I had been trying to appeal to their conscience. But you can't appeal to the conscience of a shell company. I turned back to Elena. Find out who registered that LLC. I said, I don't care what it takes. Find the name. The legal term for what Elena Marquez did next was a request for temporary injunctive relief. To me, it felt like pulling the emergency brake on a runaway train. We were not asking nicely anymore. We were not sending polite letters hoping for a compliance officer to do the right thing. Elena filed a motion in the Harbor County Superior Court that essentially said, there is credible evidence of fraud, and if you let a single penny leave this account, we will hold you liable for the full amount plus damages. It forced Marlon and Wove to stop stalling. They couldn't hide behind administrative review when a judge was staring over their shoulder. They had to freeze everything. The trust, the sub-account, the pending transfers. It was a stalemate. My money was trapped in the dark. But at least my parents couldn't spend it. I expected rage. I expected my father to pound on my door or my mother to leave screaming voicemails about ungrateful children. Instead, silence. For 2 days, my phone did not ring. The silence was worse than the screaming. It was the silence of a predator recalculating its approach. Then, on Thursday morning, the tactics shifted. I was at my desk at Seabright, staring at a spreadsheet of denied insurance claims, when an email popped up from my mother. The subject line was simply, Worried, dearest Nora. Your father and I have been talking, and we are deeply concerned about you. We know how much stress you have been under with the job and the divorce settlement. We think you might be experiencing some confusion due to exhaustion. Regarding the bank, we checked our records, and we never authorized any changes. We think you might have imagined the access denied message, or perhaps misunderstood a routine maintenance alert. When the mind is tired, it can play tricks on us. We just want you to be healthy. Please, let's stop this legal nonsense and get you some rest. I read the email twice. My hands started to shake, hovering over the keyboard. Imagined it. They were trying to convince me that the red box, the conversation with Sarah, the meeting with the compliance officer, that all of it was a hallucination brought on by stress. It was gaslighting, pure and simple, but it was refined. It was framed as love. We just want you to be healthy. I felt a sudden, sharp spike of vertigo. For a split second, a terrifying fraction of a second, I actually wondered if they were right. Had I overreacted? Had I misread the screen? Then I looked at the folder on my desk, the preservation letter, the screenshot of the fraud alert I had saved to my cloud drive. I was not crazy. They were just that committed to the lie. I didn't reply. I couldn't. If I engaged, I would be playing their game. I needed to get out of the office. I needed to go somewhere where the ground felt solid. I took the afternoon off. I got in my car and drove north, away from Larkspur Harbor, away from the sleek banks and the legal offices. I drove to Ashford Vale. It was an older neighborhood, a place of wide porches and oak trees that buckled the sidewalks. It was where my grandfather, Silas Reed, had lived until the day he died. I parked in front of a small blue house with a wraparound porch. Mrs. Tamsin Crowley was sitting on a swing, shelling peas into a metal bowl. She was 82 years old. My grandfather's neighbor and closest friend for 30 years. She was the one who had taught me how to garden, how to knit, and how to tell the difference between a person who listened and a person who just waited for their turn to speak. She looked up as I walked up the path. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened. I wondered when you would come, she said. You knew? I asked. Sitting on the step below her, I didn't know the specifics, she said, her hands never stopping their rhythmic work on the peas. But Silas knew. He knew it like he knew rain was coming when his knee ached. She wiped her hands on her apron and reached into the pocket of her housecoat. She pulled out a small, heavy envelope. It was yellowed slightly at the edges. "He gave me this 5 years ago," she said. "He told me, Tamsin, if Nora ever comes here looking like she has lost her way because of her parents, you give her this. If she comes just to visit, you keep it in your pocket. But if she comes looking for answers, it is time." I took the envelope. My name was written on the front in his shaky, blocky script. I opened it. There was a single sheet of paper inside. "My dear Nora, if you are reading this, it means they have tried it. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped that by the time you were 30, your parents would have learned to live within their own means. But people who believe the world owes them a living rarely change. They will tell you that family shares everything. That is a lie. Family shares love. Family shares burdens. But family does not share the right to consume one another. This money is your shield. Do not let them lower it. If they have interfered, do not negotiate. Do not compromise. Find a fiduciary who does not know the name Reed. Cut the cord. Nora, it is the only way you will ever be free to love them without being eaten by them. I am proud of you, not for what you do, but for who you are. Grandpa." I sat on the porch step and wept. I cried not because of the money, but because he had known. He had looked at his own son, my father, and seen a predator, and instead of looking away, he had built me a bunker. "Mrs. Crowley put a hand on my shoulder. It was light and dry, like a bird. "He feared they would treat your inheritance like a lifeboat," she said softly. He used to say, "Tamsin, they are sinking, and they will climb on top of that girl to keep their heads above water." "They are sinking?" I asked, wiping my eyes. "But they have the house, the cars." Mrs. Crowley made a small, dismissive noise. "You can possess a lot of things while you are drowning." Nora, I drove back to Larkspur Harbor with the letter in my purse. The doubt my mother's email had planted was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They weren't just bad with money. They were dangerous. When I got home, there was a message from Elena. "Come to the office." We got the audit. I went straight there. Elena was standing at a whiteboard, pinning up printed still images. Marlon and Wove caved on the video footage. She said without preamble, they didn't want a court order exposing their entire security system, so they handed over the relevant clips voluntarily. She pointed to the first image. It was a grainy, black-and-white shot of the bank lobby. The timestamp in the corner read, January 26th, 2:15 p.m. There was a woman standing at the counter. She was wearing large, dark sunglasses and a scarf wrapped around her head. Hollywood style. She was holding a thick folder. I stepped closer. I knew that scarf. I had bought it for her 3 Christmases ago. I knew the posture, the slight tilt of the head, the way she held her purse tucked tight under her arm. "It is Mom," I said. Elena nodded. "And look at the next one." The second image showed her sitting at a desk. Across from her was a man with slicked back hair and a sharp suit. They were laughing. My mother was leaning forward, her hand on the man's arm. It looked intimate, conspiratorial. "That is Grant Holloway," Elena said. "And here's the kicker. Your mother claimed in her email to you that she never went near that place. She claimed she was home all day. She lied." I said, "She lied to you." Elena said, "But she also lied to the bank. Look at the log." She handed me a sheet of paper. Visitor log entry. Marilyn Reed. Purpose, general inquiry. She didn't sign in as a trustee. Elena said, "She signed in as a general visitor, but then Grant Holloway manually overrode the security protocol to bring her back to his office without an appointment. And listen to this." Elena picked up a file. "We did some digging on Mr. Holloway. It turns out he isn't just a wealth advisor. He has a disclosed outside business activity. He is a strategic consultant for a firm called Northwick Legacy Strategies." "Northwick?" I asked. I looked them up. Elena said, "Their website is full of buzzwords about intergenerational wealth continuity and family harmony, but in the industry, they are known as closers. They specialize in persuading reluctant beneficiaries to sign over control to the family matriarch or patriarch. They run seminars on how to consolidate family power. My stomach twisted. So Grant wasn't just doing a favor. I said, he was executing a playbook. Exactly, Elena said. He wasn't tricked by your parents. He is the one who taught them how to do it. He probably gave them the script for the gaslighting email you got this morning. I looked at the picture of my mother laughing with this man. She looked so happy. She looked happier stealing my money than she had ever looked at my birthday parties. Why? I asked. Why do they need it so badly? Mrs. Crowley said they were sinking. But why? My phone buzzed. It was Evan. I answered immediately. Evan, tell me. I said, Nora, he whispered. He sounded like he was in a closet. I found it. I found the paperwork in Dad's study. What is it? Blue Heron Ridge? Evan said. What is Blue Heron Ridge? It was a development deal. Evan said, a luxury condo complex in Florida. Dad put everything into it 3 years ago. He leveraged the house. He leveraged his retirement. He thought it was a sure thing. And? The developer vanished. Evan said, the whole thing was a Ponzi scheme. The land is swamp. It is worthless. Oh my God. I breathed. The bank called the loan on the house last month. Evan continued. They are facing foreclosure. Nora, and they have a private creditor, someone they borrowed from to try and cover the mortgage payments, who is threatening to sue them for fraud. They owe money to a loan shark? Not a shark, exactly, but a hard money lender, someone nasty. They need $400,000 by the end of the month or they lose everything. The house, the cars, the reputation. That's why they did it. I said, it wasn't about controlling me. It was about saving themselves. They convinced themselves it was the same thing. Evan said, Dad keeps saying, it is family money. It stays in the family. We will pay her back when the market turns. The market isn't going to turn. I said, the money is gone. I know, Evan said. His voice broke. I know. Nora, I am sorry. I should have told you sooner. I knew they were in trouble, but I didn't know they would come for you. I hung up. I sat in Elena's chair, staring at the floor. It all made sense. The sudden interest in my finances, the access denied, the rush. They weren't evil masterminds. They were desperate, drowning people who had decided that my life preserver belonged to them. I need to see him. I told Elena. Your father? Elena asked. I advise against it. I need to hear him say it. I said, I need him to look me in the eye and admit he lost everything. I texted my father, meet me at the Marina Park, bench by the water, alone. Or I released the video of Mom at the bank to the police. He was there in 20 minutes. He looked smaller than I remembered. My father had always been a big man, broad-shouldered and loud, but sitting on that bench, watching the gray water of the Sound lap against the rocks, he looked shrunken. His polo shirt hung loose on his frame. I sat down on the other end of the bench. I didn't look at him. I know about Blue Heron Ridge. I said, he flinched, a physical jerking motion, like I had slapped him. He didn't deny it. He let out a long, shuddering breath. It was a sure thing. Nora, he said. His voice was thick. The brochures, the projections. It was going to triple our net worth. We were going to leave you and Evan millions. So you gambled. I said, and you lost. I was trying to build a legacy, he cried, turning to me. There were tears in his eyes, real tears. I had never seen my father cry before. I did it for you kids. Don't, I said. Don't put this on us. You did it for your ego. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. We are going to lose the house. Nora, do you understand? The house you grew up in, your mother, it will kill her. The shame will kill her. So you decided to kill me instead? I asked. No, he protested. We were just borrowing it. Just for 6 months. Until I could refinance the commercial loans. We would have put it back with interest. You stole it. I said. You forged authorization. You lied to the bank. You gaslit me. You told me I was crazy. We had to, he pleaded. He reached out to grab my hand, but I pulled away. Nora, please, you have to understand. It is all one pot. We raised you. We fed you. When you were a baby, we gave you everything. Now we need help. Why is that so hard for you to understand? It is just money. Just money. I looked at him. I saw the terror in his eyes. Yes, but I also saw the entitlement. He truly believed that my safety was less important than his status. He believed that my grandfather's gift to me was actually a reserve fund for his own mistakes. It isn't just money. Dad, I said, it is my freedom. Grandfather left it to me so I would never have to depend on anyone, and you tried to take that away. He slumped back against the bench. We are your parents, he whispered. Doesn't that mean anything? It means you were supposed to protect me. I said, not prey on me. I stood up. I am not lifting the freeze. I said, Nora, please, he sobbed. They will take the house next week. Then you better start packing. I said. I walked away. I heard him calling my name, his voice cracking. But I didn't turn around. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It started as guilt, a heavy, crushing weight that told me I was a bad daughter, that I was cruel, that I should just give them the money and save them. Then, the guilt burned off, and underneath was rage, hot, white rage. They had looked at me and seen a resource. They had planned this. They had worn disguises, and then, finally, came the numbness, the realization that the parents I thought I had, the flawed but loving people, did not exist. These were strangers. These were people who would drown me to stay dry. I got back to Elena's office an hour later. I felt hollowed out, like a shell. Elena was waiting for me. She looked serious. How did it go? She asked. He admitted it. I said, the debt, the failed investment, everything. Elena nodded. Well, I have something else, she said. She slid a document across the desk. I got the formation documents for Reed Harbor Holdings, LLC. She said, the shell company they transferred your money to. I looked at the paper. It was a standard Delaware filing. Look at the registered agent. Elena said, and look at the organizer. I looked at the signature at the bottom of the page. It was a scrawl, but the printed name below it was clear. Martin Klein. I stared at the name. The world seemed to stop. Martin Klein. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a banker. He was Jillian's uncle, the uncle she had cut off 10 years ago, the one she never spoke about, the one who had done time for insurance fraud in the 90s. Jillian. I whispered, does Jillian know? Elena asked. I don't know. I said. My mind was reeling. Jillian had been my rock. She had helped me build the timeline. She had told me to document everything. But her uncle was the architect. Wait, I said, pointing to the date on the document. This LLC was formed 3 weeks ago. Yes, Elena said. Jillian told me to come to you. I said, she told me to fight. But did she know her uncle was involved? Elena asked. Or did your parents find him on their own? I remembered something. A year ago, at a barbecue. My father had complained about tax trouble. Jillian had been there. She had made a joke. You should talk to my Uncle Martin. He can make paperwork disappear. But don't actually talk to him. He's a crook. My father had laughed. Had he remembered? Had he reached out? Or was Jillian playing both sides? I felt the numbness crack. We need to find out, I said. Elena nodded. Then we need to get Martin Klein on the record. I met Jillian at a coffee shop on the edge of town, a place with scratched wooden tables and mismatched mugs, far away from the polished venues where my parents held court. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat in the corner, facing the door, my hand resting on the envelope that contained the formation documents for Reed Harbor Holdings, LLC. When Jillian walked in, she looked tired. The strain of the last few days was etched around her eyes. She ordered a black coffee and sat down opposite me, unwinding her scarf. You look like you haven't slept, she said. I slept 4 hours. I said, I spent the rest of the night looking at a name. I slid the paper across the table. I didn't say anything. I just watched her face. Jillian picked up the document. She squinted at the small print, scanning the legalese of the Delaware filing. Then her eyes stopped at the bottom of the page. Her breath hitched. A small, sharp sound. "Martin," she whispered. She looked up at me, her face draining of color. "Nora," she said, "tell me you don't think I knew." "I don't think you knew," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I need to know how they found him. My parents don't run in circles with fixers who have criminal records." Jillian dropped the paper as if it were burning her fingers. She put her face in her hands. "It was the barbecue," she said, her voice muffled. "Last 4th of July. Your dad was complaining about capital gains taxes. He was 3 beers in. I made a joke. A stupid, throwaway joke. I said, 'You should call my Uncle Martin. He can make money disappear into thin air.' I remembered that barbecue. I remembered laughing." "They called him?" I asked. "They must have," Jillian said. Looking up, she looked sick. "Nora, I haven't spoken to Martin in 6 years. He is a predator. He preys on desperate people who think they are smarter than the system. If he is involved, then this isn't just a family dispute," I said. "It is a professional operation." Jillian reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her grip was tight, desperate. "I will fix this," she said. "I will testify. I will tell the court exactly who Martin is. I will tell them about the shell companies he set up for my dad's friends back in the 90s. I am not protecting him, and I am not protecting your parents." I believed her. Jillian was the collateral damage in this war, just like I was. We finished our coffee in silence, the air between us heavy with the realization of how deep the rot went. My parents hadn't just made a mistake, they had sought out a specialist in deception, back at Stonebridge and Marquez. Elena was building a web. She had subpoenaed the email metadata from Grant Holloway's work account. Marlin and Wove had tried to block it, claiming attorney-client privilege. But the judge had ruled that since the communications were with an outside third party, Martin Klein, the privilege did not apply. Elena put the printouts on her desk. They were not strangers. She said, she read from a highlighted email chain dated 2 weeks prior to the transfer. From M. Klein to G. Holloway, subject, read file/expedited, Grant, per our discussion. The clients are ready to move on the consolidation. They have the clerical authority documents prepared. We need the liquidity moved to the LLC by month end to satisfy the external obligations. Can you expedite the beneficiary compliance process? From G. Holloway to M. Klein, subject, read file/expedited. I can push it through as a priority update. I will flag the current beneficiary as high risk to justify the freeze. Just make sure the parents are physically present to validate the override. We need them on camera. Elena looked at me. We need the liquidity moved to satisfy external obligations. She repeated, they admit it right there in black and white. They weren't protecting your money from you. They were moving it to pay the debt. And Grant knew. I said, he knew about the debt. He knew everything. Elena said, this proves collusion. Grant wasn't a negligent banker. He was a co-conspirator. He breached his fiduciary duty not by accident, but by design. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It had been buzzing all morning. My mother had changed tactics. The concerned parent phase was over. Now, she was salting the earth. I had received a text from my Aunt Carol in Florida. Nora, your mother called me in tears. She says you are suing them? After everything they have done for you? I thought you were raised better than to air dirty laundry like this. Then a message from my cousin David. Hey, heard you're having some mental health issues. Hope you get the help you need. But don't take it out on your folks. She was calling everyone. She was telling them I was unstable. She was telling them I was greedy. She was isolating me, cutting off my support network before I could even reach out to them. It hurt. It hurt physically. A dull ache in the center of my chest. These were people I had known my whole life, and they believed her. Of course they believed her. She was Marilyn Reed. She was the picture of respectable matriarchy. I was just the divorced daughter living in an apartment. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post the evidence on social media. I wanted to burn it all down, but I didn't. I remembered what Jillian had said. If you act crazy, you prove them right. So I went to work. I walked into Seabright Clinical Billing Group at 9 o'clock sharp. I sat at my desk. I reviewed claims. I held team meetings. I ate a turkey sandwich at my desk. I focused on the mundane, rhythmic tasks of my job. Every time my phone buzzed with a hateful message from a relative, I didn't reply. I took a screenshot. I saved it to a folder named harassment. Then I put the phone face down and went back to work. My silence was my shield. It was driving them insane. They wanted a reaction. They wanted a fight they could point to and say, "See? Look how irrational she is," by denying them the drama. I was starving the fire, but inside, I was burning. 2 days later, the break came from inside the bank. Elena called me at lunch. Her voice was low, urgent. "Get here," she said. "We got a package." When I arrived, there was a manila envelope on her desk. No return address. "It is from a whistleblower," Elena said. "Someone inside Marlin and Wove who saw the preservation letter and got scared. Or maybe someone who just hates Grant Holloway." She pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was an access log audit. "Grant told the compliance team he only accessed your file on the day of the transfer to process the request," Elena said. "But look at this." She pointed to a series of timestamps. January 4th, January 7th, January 12th. "He was in your account 3 weeks ago," Elena said. "He was reviewing your transaction history. He was checking your average daily balance. He was downloading your signature card. He was casing the joint." I said, "Exactly." Elena said, "This wasn't an emergency reaction to a mental health crisis. This was a premeditated extraction. He was gathering the data he needed to bypass the security questions. This changes everything," Elena said. Standing up, she looked fierce. "We are done playing nice with the branch manager. I am calling general counsel." I watched her make the call. I heard her voice shift from professional to lethal. "We have evidence of premeditated fraud by your senior advisor," she said into the phone. "We have proof he colluded with an outside fixer. We have logs showing unauthorized access weeks prior to the event. You have 2 choices. You can admit negligence, restore the funds immediately, and cooperate with our investigation, or I can file this evidence with the Securities and Exchange Commission and the State Attorney General tomorrow morning, and I will attach a press release." There was a long silence on the other end. "I will give you 24 hours, Elena said, and she hung up. "They are going to fold," she told me. "They have to. They can't survive a regulator digging into their internal controls." I felt a surge of hope. It was almost over. But my parents weren't done. That evening, my father texted me, "Nora, please, no lawyers, just family. Meet us for dinner. We have a solution. We can fix this. Please give us one chance to explain before you destroy us." I showed the text to Elena. "Don't go." She said, "I have to." I said, "Why?" "Because I need to see what the solution is," I said. "And because if I don't go, they will tell the judge I refuse to mediate. I want to show that I'm reasonable." Elena sighed. "Fine, but you record it, and you sign nothing. Absolutely nothing." The meeting was at the Cedar Lantern Bistro. It was the kind of place my parents loved. Dark wood, heavy curtains, waiters in vests who whispered the specials. It was a place designed to make you feel like you were part of a club. They had reserved a private room in the back. When I walked in, my mother was already crying. She was dabbing her eyes with a linen napkin. My father was pouring wine. Evan was there, sitting in the corner, staring at his shoes. He looked terrible, pale, unshaven. "Nora," my father said, standing up, "thank you for coming. I didn't sit down. I'm not staying long." I said, "You said you had a solution. Sit down." "Darling, please." My mother sniffled. "Have some wine." "I don't want wine. Mom, I want my trust fund." My father cleared his throat. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document. It was bound in a blue cover. "We know we handled this poorly," he said. "We panicked. The debt, it is real. Nora, it is terrifying. But we never meant to steal from you. We just needed a bridge loan." He slid the document across the table. "This is a formal agreement," he said. "It is a temporary asset management plan. It states that the funds in Reed Harbor Holdings are still yours. It guarantees that we will pay back every cent with 5% interest once the house is sold and the other investments mature." I looked at the document. It looked official. It had signature lines. It had notary blocks. And, my father added, his voice trembling slightly, "It grants us retroactive power of attorney for the transfer, just to clean up the paperwork with the bank, so nobody gets in trouble, so nobody goes to jail." I corrected. "Nora, please," my mother wailed. "We are your parents. Do you really want to see your father in handcuffs? Do you want to ruin the family name?" I flipped through the document. It was nonsense. It was a promise to pay from people who were bankrupt when the other investments mature. There were no other investments. Blue Heron Ridge was a swamp. Then I saw it. On the last page, there was an exhibit, beneficiary consent form. It was signed, Nora Reed. I stared at the signature. It was my name. It was my handwriting. The loop of the N was distinctive, the way the R trailed off. But I hadn't signed it. I looked closer. The line quality was shaky, too even. It didn't have the variation of pressure that a pen makes on paper. I looked up at my father. "Where did you get this?" I asked. He froze. "What do you mean?" "It is just a draft." "This signature," I said, pointing to the page. "It is from the lease on my apartment, the one I signed 3 years ago, the one you co-signed because I hadn't started my job yet." My father's face went gray. "I know this because I have a jagged scratch on my desk where the pen slipped on the D." I said, "And this signature has the exact same wobble." "You traced it," I whispered. "You kept a copy of my lease, and you traced my signature onto this consent form. It was just to show the lawyers what it would look like." My father stammered, "A placeholder. You forged my signature," I said, my voice rising. "You have been practicing." Evan made a sound. It was a sob. He stood up so fast his chair fell over. "Stop lying!" he screamed. We all turned to look at him. Evan, the quiet one. Evan, the peacemaker. He was shaking. Tears were streaming down his face. "You told me she knew," Evan shouted at our parents. "You told me Nora was on board. You said she agreed to the restructuring but was too busy to handle the paperwork." "Evan, calm down," my father snapped. "No," Evan yelled. "I helped you. I drove the papers to the mailbox place. I filed the LLC forms. I did it because I thought we were all in this together. I thought we were saving the family." He turned to me. His eyes were wild with grief. "Nora, I swear to God, I didn't know they were stealing it. They told me you wanted to help but couldn't be seen liquidating the trust because of the divorce proceedings. They said we were protecting the money from your ex-husband." I looked at my brother. I believed him. He was weak. Yes, he was easily led. But he wasn't a thief. He had been used, just like I had, a pawn to run their errands so they could keep their hands clean. You used him. I said to my parents, "You made your son an accessory to fraud." "We did what we had to do," my mother screamed, slamming her hand on the table. She dropped the act. The tears vanished. Her face was twisted in a snarl I had never seen before. "You selfish little girl," she spat. "You sit there with your $500,000 while we are drowning. We gave you life. We gave you everything. And you won't lift a finger to save us from ruin? You would rather see us on the street than part with your precious security blanket?" "It is my money," I said. "Grandfather gave it to me. He was a bitter old man," my mother shrieked. "And you are just like him. Cold, unfeeling. You don't deserve that money. We earned it. We put up with him for 30 years. It is ours by right." The room fell silent. There it was. The truth. They didn't see it as theft. They saw it as collection. They believed they were entitled to it. I picked up my purse. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" my father asked. Confused? "For saying it loud enough for the recorder," I said. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The recording app was running. The red waveform was pulsing. My mother's face went slack. "I am leaving." I said, "If you contact me again, I will call the police. Evan, if you want to stay out of prison, I suggest you get your own lawyer." I walked out of the private room, through the restaurant, and into the cool night air. My legs were shaking so hard I could barely stand. I sat in my car and just breathed, in and out, in and out. It was done. I had the confession. I had the proof of forgery. I had the whistleblower evidence. We had them cornered. I drove to Elena's office to drop off the recording. It was late, almost 9 o'clock, but her lights were on. I walked in, feeling a strange sense of victory. I got them. I said, "I have them on tape admitting the forgery." Elena didn't smile. She was standing by the window, looking out at the dark street. She held a piece of paper in her hand. "That is good." "Nora," she said, "but we have a new problem." "What?" I asked. "The bank is folding. We have the evidence. The bank is cooperating." Elena said, "That is the problem. They just sent over the full instruction set for the account. Not just the past transactions, the future ones." "Future ones?" "Grant Holloway didn't just move the money to the LLC." Elena said, "He set up a cascaded transfer." She turned to face me. "There is a standing instruction in the system." Elena said, "It is coded as a quarterly liquidity sweep. It is designed to automatically empty the account of any remaining balance and transfer it to an offshore entity in the Cayman Islands." "Offshore?" I asked. "Why?" "To put it beyond the reach of a U.S. court." Elena said, "Once it hits the Caymans, we can't touch it without a treaty request, which takes years. When does it trigger?" I asked. Elena looked at the clock on the wall. "It triggers at midnight on the last day of the quarter." She said, "That is in 48 hours, but the account is frozen." I said, "The freeze applies to manual transfers." Elena said, "But this was set up as a system-level automated sweep. It might bypass the freeze logic if the bank's software considers it a pre-existing contract execution. We need a specific court order to kill the code, and the judge is away on a retreat until Monday." I said, Elena nodded, "We have 48 hours to stop a ghost in the machine." She said, "Or the money vanishes forever. 48 hours is a lifetime when you are watching your future dissolve." Elena Marquez did not sleep. I knew this because every time I checked my email during that agonizing window, there was a new timestamp from her. She filed an emergency motion for an expanded temporary restraining order at 2 in the morning. She served the general counsel of Marlin and Wove at 4 in the morning. By 8 o'clock on Friday, she had a judge on the line, not our assigned judge, who was at a judicial retreat, but an emergency duty magistrate who listened to the recording of my father admitting to forgery and signed the order without hesitation. The order was a blunt instrument. It commanded Marlin and Wove to immediately suspend all automated transfer protocols linked to the account ending in 4922. It specifically named the quarterly liquidity sweep and ordered it disabled under penalty of contempt. At 11 o'clock that morning, Elena called me. "We killed the ghost," she said. "The sweep is canceled. The money stays put." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 3 days. "And there is more," Elena added. Her voice was grimly satisfied. "Marlin and Wove just placed Grant Holloway on administrative leave. Security escorted him out of the building 20 minutes ago. They are panicking. Nora, they realized that if that money moved to the Caymans after we put them on notice, they would lose their banking license." I felt a surge of triumph. But it was cold. It was the victory of a person who has managed to lock the doors while the burglars are still banging on the windows. "Now comes the cleanup," Elena said, "and the pressure. Do not answer your door." I should have listened. The court, in its infinite wisdom and desire to clear dockets, had mandated a pre-hearing mediation session. It was standard procedure for family disputes involving trusts. The legal system hated ruling on family money. It preferred that everyone sit in a room, cry a little, and sign a compromise so the judge could go to lunch. I met the mediator at a neutral office suite on Saturday morning. Her name was Mrs. Gable. She had soft gray hair, a cardigan that looked hand-knit, and a voice that sounded like chamomile tea. She was exactly the kind of person my parents would charm in 5 minutes. Elena sat next to me, her posture rigid. My parents sat on the other side of the oval table. My mother was wearing black, as if she were in mourning. My father looked haggard, staring at his hands. They had brought a new lawyer, a man named Mr. Pierce from a firm called Dunwell and Pierce. He looked expensive and bored. Nora, Mrs. Gable began, smiling gently. The goal of today is not to assign blame. It is to find a path to family harmony. We are talking about a misunderstanding that has spiraled out of control. Surely, we can find a middle ground that respects your independence while acknowledging your parents' desire to assist you. I looked at Mrs. Gable. I saw the trap immediately. She saw a daughter and two worried parents. She didn't see the forgery. She didn't see the shell company. There is no middle ground. I said, Mrs. Gable blinked. I understand emotions are high, she said soothingly. But litigation is so destructive. Your parents have proposed a settlement where the funds are returned to the trust, but they retain a minority advisory role to help guide investment strategy. That seems like a generous offer, considering the complexities. I turned to my parents. My mother looked at me with wide, wet eyes. We just want to be part of your life. Nora, she whispered. We just want to help you build a future. I looked back at the mediator. They forged my signature. I said clearly, Mrs. Gable paused. She looked at Mr. Pierce, allegedly. Mr. Pierce said, waving a hand. That is a matter of handwriting interpretation. We are here to talk about the trust structure. It is not interpretation. I said, I have it on tape. Mrs. Gable's smile faltered. Nora, she said, her voice sharpening slightly, we are trying to avoid a criminal referral here. If you persist with this hostile narrative, you are going to destroy your family. Is $480,000 worth losing your mother and father? Is it worth the guilt you will feel when they are humiliated publicly? I felt the old programming kick in, the desire to be the good girl, the desire to smooth things over. Just give them the money. A voice in my head whispered, It is just paper. They are your blood. Then I remembered the access denied screen. I remembered the text message from my aunt calling me unstable. I remembered the rented mailbox for Reed Harbor Holdings. I am not negotiating about theft. I stood up. Mrs. Gable, I continued, you are asking me to balance family harmony against a felony. You are asking me to pay a ransom to my own parents so they won't feel bad about trying to rob me. Nora, sit down, my father snapped. It was the old voice, the voice of command. No, I said, I am demanding accountability, and I am demanding safety. Until I have both. There is no conversation. I walked out. Elena followed me, and as the door closed, I heard Mrs. Gable sigh. Well, that was unproductive. I went home to my apartment. I locked the deadbolt. I checked the chain. 2 hours later, the escalation began. I heard a commotion in the hallway. Voices, loud, distressed voices. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. My mother was standing in the hallway, right in front of my door. But she wasn't knocking. She was facing the other way, toward the elevator and the doors of my neighbors. She was crying, loud, theatrical sobs that echoed off the linoleum floor. Nora, she wailed. Please, please just talk to us. We love you so much. Why are you shutting us out? I saw Mrs. Henderson from apartment 3B open her door. She looked concerned. Is everything all right? Mrs. Henderson asked. Oh, I'm so sorry to disturb you, my mother sobbed, clutching a handkerchief. I am so worried about my daughter. She has stopped taking her medication. She is locked in there and we are terrified she might hurt herself. We just want to make sure she is safe. I stepped back from the door, my blood running cold. She was doing it again. She was performing distress. She was planting the narrative with my neighbors that I was mentally unstable. If the police came, Mrs. Henderson would tell them. Oh yes. The mother was frantic. She said the daughter was off her meds. I stood in the center of my living room, trembling. I wanted to rip the door open and scream the truth. She is lying. She is a thief. But that is what a crazy person would do. I took a deep breath. I pulled out my phone. I walked back to the door. I held the camera lens up to the peephole. I recorded her. I recorded her looking around to make sure Mrs. Henderson was watching. I recorded the way her sobbing stopped instantly when Mrs. Henderson went back inside, replaced by a cold, hard stare at my door number. I recorded her leaning in to whisper, "You ungrateful little bitch," before she started wailing again for the benefit of the hallway. I sent the video to Elena. She is outside. I texted, "She is telling neighbors I'm off my meds." Elena replied instantly, "Do not open the door. I am calling the building management and the police non-emergency line to report a trespasser. Stay away from the windows." My mother left 10 minutes later, presumably when she realized I wasn't going to give her the audience she craved. That evening, the evidence landed, and it landed hard. Marlin and Wove, terrified by the preservation order and the suspension of their star advisor, decided to cooperate fully. They sent over a batch of internal messages from Grant Holloway's terminal. Elena forwarded them to me with a note. "Read this, and don't throw up." I opened the file. It was a chat log between Grant Holloway and another advisor at the firm, dated 3 days before the transfer. Advisor B: "Hey Grant, are you sure about this Reed transfer? The compliance flag is going to be red hot on a third-party liquidation." Holloway: "It is handled. The parents are the drivers. We have the clerical authority docs." Advisor B: "What about the beneficiary? If she wakes up and sees a zero balance, she's going to scream fraud." Holloway: "Let her scream. The parents have been seeding the ground for months. We can sell this as protecting her from herself. If she challenges it, we paint her as unstable. The parents will back us up. It is a win-win. We keep the AUM under the family umbrella, and the parents get their liquidity. Protecting her from herself. It was written there in blue text. A strategy, a marketing pitch. My sanity was just a collateral cost in their customer retention plan." I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a profound, clarifying anger. They had discussed destroying my reputation like they were discussing a portfolio rebalancing. I called Jillian. "I need you to find everything on Martin Klein." I said, "I need to know how deep this goes." Jillian was ahead of me. "I went to the county clerk's archives this afternoon," she said. "I pulled the physical files from the 90s, the ones that weren't digitized. What did you find?" "Martin didn't just do this for my dad's friends," Jillian said. "He had a whole system. He would find families in debt, usually gambling debt or failed real estate deals, and he would pitch them a legacy consolidation package. He would set up a shell company, transfer the assets from the children or the grandparents, and then take a 15% cut as a consulting fee." 15%. I said, "That is $70,000 of my trust." "Exactly," Jillian said. "And here's the worst part. I found a civil suit from 2004. A daughter sued him. She claimed he helped her parents drain her college fund." "What happened?" "It settled out of court," Jillian said. "Sealed. But the filing details are there. The parents claimed the daughter was on drugs. They used the exact same playbook. Nora. Protecting the asset. Martin gave them the script. So Grant Holloway and Martin Klein are running a franchise." I said. "Grant finds the desperate clients at the bank, and Martin builds the shell companies to hide the theft. And your parents were the perfect marks," Jillian said softly, desperate, narcissistic, and holding the keys to a $500,000 piggy bank. I thanked her and hung up. I sat in the dark, watching the city lights of Larkspur Harbor. I was tired. God, I was so tired. The fight felt endless. Every time I turned over a rock, there was another snake. The lawyer, the banker, the fixer, the parents. It was a machine designed to crush people like me. For a moment, I let myself think about giving up. What if I just let them have it? What if I signed the settlement? They would pay off the debt on the house. They would leave me alone. I could go back to my job. I could stop paying lawyers. I could sleep. Sure, I would lose the money. I would lose the condo, but I would gain peace. I called Elena. Maybe I should just settle. I said, My voice sounded small. Nora, Elena said. Her tone was sharp. Listen to me. They are never going to stop, I said. Even if I win, they will hate me forever. If you pay them, Elena said, you are not buying peace. You are buying a subscription to extortion. What do you mean? If you bail them out now, you prove that their strategy works, Elena said. You prove that if they gaslight you enough, if they scream loud enough, if they threaten you enough, you will fold. What happens in 5 years when they need money for nursing care? What happens when they make another bad investment? They will come for you again, and they will know exactly how to break you. But they are my parents, I whispered. That is why it is dangerous. Elena said, a stranger can only rob you once. Family can rob you for a lifetime because you keep opening the door. She was right. I knew she was right. I had to close the door. The next morning, Sunday, my phone rang. It was Evan. I almost didn't answer. I was afraid he was going to ask me to reconsider. Nora? He said. Hi, Evan. I'm at the police station, he said. My heart stopped. Why? Are you okay? I am turning myself in, he said. What, Evan? No, I talked to a lawyer. He said, he told me that if I sign an affidavit admitting my role in the LLC formation, and if I testify that Mom and Dad lied to me about your consent, I can get immunity from prosecution. But I have to give them up. Evan, I said, gripping the phone, you don't have to do that. We can find another way. There is no other way, he said. His voice was steady. Steadier than I had ever heard it. I spent all night thinking about what they did to you, what I helped them do. Nora, they looked me in the face and lied. They used me to steal from my sister. If you do this, I said, tears pricking my eyes, they will never forgive you. I know, Evan said. I talked to Dad this morning. I told him what I was going to do. What did he say? He told me I was no son of his. Evan said, he told me I was a traitor. I closed my eyes. I could hear the pain in his voice, the terrible, ripping sound of a family breaking apart. I am sorry. Evan, I said. Don't be, he said. You were the one in the crosshairs. I'm just taking the bullet out of the chamber. He hung up. I sat there for a long time, crying for my brother. He had done the bravest thing imaginable. He had chosen truth over tribe, and it had cost him everything. Monday morning, the clock was ticking down. I went to Elena's office. She looked energized. We have them. She said, Evan's affidavit is a nuclear weapon. He confirms the forgery. He confirms the intent to deceive, and Marlin and Wove knows it. She added, they just sent a new offer. She handed me a document. Confidential settlement agreement. Marlin and Wove. Private Wealth agrees to immediately restore full access to the account. Marlin and Wove agrees to reimburse all legal fees incurred by the client. Up to $50,000. Marlin and Wove will issue a formal letter of apology acknowledging administrative error. Condition. The client agrees to a strict non-disclosure agreement regarding the employment status of Grant Holloway and the internal security protocols of the firm. The client agrees to waive any future claims regarding this incident. They want to buy my silence. I said, yes. Elena said, they are terrified of the reputational damage. If it gets out that their star advisor was helping hijack trust funds, they will lose millions in client assets. It is a good offer, I said. It gives me everything back. It gives you the money. Elena said, but it protects Grant, and it protects the bank. They will quietly fire him, give him a severance package, and he will go to another firm and do it again. I looked at the paper. Administrative error. It wasn't an error. I said, it was a conspiracy. Elena nodded. I want to push back, she said. I want to demand that they waive the NDA regarding criminal referrals. I want them to cooperate with the police investigation into Grant and Martin Klein. Do it, I said. Elena sent the email. We waited. While we waited, I opened my briefcase. I had brought the original trust document, the one my grandfather had signed 20 years ago. I had read it 100 times. but mostly the parts about the distribution schedule. I started reading the boilerplate text, the boring parts at the back. Article 9. Trustee succession and removal. I scanned the dense legal paragraphs. The beneficiary shall have the right to remove the corporate trustee upon a showing of cause. I read on. Cause shall be defined as bankruptcy of the trustee, failure to provide accounting, or material breach of fiduciary duty. I stopped. Material breach of fiduciary duty. I looked up at Elena. Elena, look at this. She came around the desk. She read the clause. Her eyes widened. Grandpa put an eject button in the trust. I said, if we can prove material breach. Elena said, reading quickly, you don't just get to sue them, you get to fire them. You can move the entire trust to a new institution of your choice, and conspiring to steal the principal is definitely a material breach. I said, it is the definition of it. Elena smiled. This changes the leverage, she said. We aren't just a customer with a complaint anymore. We are the boss. The phone rang. It was the general counsel for Marlin and Wove. Elena put it on speaker. Ms. Marquez, the voice said. It was tight. Controlled. We have reviewed your counterproposal. We cannot agree to waive the confidentiality regarding Mr. Holloway's employment file. That is a privacy violation. The offer stands as written. Take the restitution and the fees, or we will litigate the definition of negligence for the next 3 years. They were playing hardball. They thought I was desperate for the cash. They thought I wouldn't risk a long court battle. Elena looked at me. She raised an eyebrow. Your call. I leaned toward the phone. This is Nora Reed. I said, Ms. Reed? The counsel said, I hope you are seeing reason. I am seeing something. I said, I am seeing Article 9, Section 4 of the Silas Reed Testamentary Trust. There was a silence on the line. A shuffling of papers. I am familiar with the document. The counsel said, his voice wary, then you know that I have the power to remove the trustee for cause. I said, and I am finding a lot of cause. Ms. Reed, moving a trust of this complexity is a significant administrative burden, he said dismissively, and you would need a court order to prove breach. I have a court order. I said, I have an affidavit from a co-conspirator. I have internal chat logs from your employee plotting to gaslight me. Ms. Reed, I am not accepting your settlement. I said, and I am not just suing you, I am firing you. Ms. Reed, let's not be hasty. The voice cracked slightly. We can discuss an enhanced compensation package. I am initiating the transfer of trusteeship effective immediately. I said, I have already selected a successor. Brightwell Fiduciary Services. You will receive the formal demand within the hour. You can't just... I just did. I said, I signaled Elena to hang up. She tapped the button, a grin spreading across her face. You just fired $1 billion bank, she said. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a weight I hadn't realized was there. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the tether. As long as the money was at Marlin and Wove, my parents had an in. They knew the bankers. They knew the system. It was their home turf. By moving it, I was taking the game to a new stadium, one where they didn't know the rules, one where they didn't have a family contact listed in the file. I am severing the tie. I said, Elena started typing the transfer demand. Nora, she said without looking up, you know what this means, right? What? When we move this money, your parents are going to hit the wall. The debt collectors are going to come for the house. The foreclosure will happen. There is no saving them now. I walked to the window. I looked out at the street. I thought about my grandfather sitting on his porch in Ashford Vale, writing that letter, cut the cord. Nora, I thought about Evan walking into the police station. I thought about my mother performing for the neighbors through the peephole. They made their choices. I said, Elena hit send. The printer whirred to life. It printed the demand letter. To Marlin and Wove, Private Wealth. Notice of removal of trustee for cause. I signed it. The pen did not slip. My hand was steady. The theft was stopped. The money was safe. But the war wasn't over. My parents were cornered animals now, and cornered animals bite, but I wasn't the prey anymore. I was the one holding the leash. The Harbor County Superior Court smelled of floor wax and old paper, a scent that I had always associated with traffic tickets and jury duty. Today, it smelled like a battlefield. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Elena. My hands were folded on the table, resting on top of the blue binder that contained the autopsy of my family's betrayal. Across the aisle, my parents sat with Mr. Pierce, their new attorney from Dunwell and Pierce Advisory Law. They looked immaculate. My mother wore a navy suit that suggested conservative respectability. My father wore a tie I had given him for Father's Day 2 years ago. They did not look like thieves. They looked like the victims of a misunderstanding. Judge Holloway, no relation to Grant, thankfully, was a woman with sharp glasses and a demeanor that suggested she had zero patience for family drama. Mr. Pierce stood up first. He was smooth, the kind of lawyer who charged by the minute and spoke in paragraphs that sounded like lullabies. "Your Honor," he began, buttoning his jacket, "we are here today because of a tragic breakdown in communication. The Reed family has always operated as a single economic unit. The trust in question, while technically in Nora Reed's name, was established by her grandfather with the intention of benefiting the family line. My clients, acting under the advice of financial professionals, believed they were authorized to restructure these assets to protect them." He turned to look at me. His eyes were cold, but his smile was sad. "Ms. Reed is going through a difficult time." He continued, "A painful divorce, career stress. My clients were told she was being influenced by aggressive legal counsel to isolate herself. They were trying to preserve the capital. This is not fraud. Your Honor, it is parenting." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. Parenting. Elena stood up. She didn't use flowery language. She didn't smile. She walked to the podium and placed a single sheet of paper on the projector. It was the timeline. "Your Honor," Elena said, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. "This is not a dispute about parenting styles. This is a dispute about math and malice." She pointed to the first date. "January 27th, she said. "The plaintiff attempts to access her funds and receives a denial message." She pointed to the next item. "January 26th. The defendant, Marilyn Reed, enters the bank physically, despite later claiming in writing she was never there. We have video evidence." She moved down the list. "January 4th, the financial advisor, Grant Holloway, begins accessing the file to test security protocols, weeks before the alleged emergency regarding my client's mental health." And finally, Elena placed a blown-up image of the settlement document on the screen, the one with the traced signature. "And this," Elena said, "this is a forgery. This is a signature lifted from a 3-year-old lease application and applied to a retroactive consent form. You do not forge a signature if you believe you have moral authority. Your Honor, you forge a signature because you know you are stealing." The courtroom was silent. I saw my mother stiffen. She whispered something to Mr. Pierce, but he didn't look at her. He was looking at the screen. Elena continued, "We have chat logs where the advisor discusses painting the beneficiary as unstable. We have the destination account, a shell company formed by a known fixer with a criminal record, and we have a queued instruction to move the funds offshore to the Cayman Islands at the end of the quarter." She turned to the judge. "This was not a rescue mission, Your Honor. It was an extraction." Judge Holloway looked at the defense table. She looked at the timeline. She looked at my parents. "Mr. Pierce," the judge said, "do you have an executed power of attorney that predates the transfer? One that is not currently being contested as a forgery?" "We are locating the original," Mr. Pierce stammered. "So that is a no," the judge said. She banged her gavel. It wasn't the final ruling, but it was the first domino. "I am issuing an immediate order regarding the custodian. Marlin and Wove," the judge said. "They are to reinstate Ms. Reed's full access effective immediately. They are to operate under enhanced verification protocols. No third-party access. No family contacts. They are to turn over all internal records to the State Department of Banking for regulatory review. And the court is preserving all evidence for a potential criminal referral regarding the allegations of forgery and conspiracy. My father's face went white. Criminal referral. That was the word that pierced the bubble. We are taking a 15-minute recess, the judge said. I walked out into the hallway. My legs felt heavy. It was going our way. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving surgery. I was standing near the water fountain when they cornered me. My parents moved fast. Mr. Pierce was busy on his phone, presumably trying to mitigate the damage to his own reputation. My mother and father flanked me, blocking my path to the exit. Nora, my father said. His voice was low, urgent. I stepped back. Stay away from me, I said. Please, just listen, my mother hissed. She wasn't crying now. She looked desperate. Her eyes were darting around the hallway to see if anyone was watching. The judge is talking about criminal charges. My father said, Do you know what that means? It means prison. Nora, it means I lose my license. It means we lose everything. You should have thought of that before you traced my signature. I said, We can fix this, my father said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It looked like a check. We have a buyer for the boat, he said, and I cashed out the life insurance policy. It is $70,000. He tried to press the paper into my hand. I let it fall to the floor. What is this? I asked. If you drop the suit, my father said, sweating. If you tell the judge you remembered signing the paper, we can say it was a misunderstanding. We give you this cash now, and we walk away. We leave you alone, forever. I looked at the check on the dirty linoleum floor. $70,000. A fraction of what they owed to the hard money lenders. A fraction of what they had tried to steal from me. They were still negotiating. Even now, with the gavel hanging over their heads, they thought everything was a transaction. They thought my dignity had a price tag. You still don't get it, I whispered. We are offering you a clean break, my mother said, her voice rising. You pay the debt quietly, and we disappear. We move to Florida. You never have to see us again. I looked at her. I looked for any sign of remorse, any sign that she missed her daughter. Not just her daughter's credit rating. I saw nothing but calculation. No, I said. Nora, don't be stupid, my father growled. I am not being stupid. Dad, I said, I am being the person grandfather raised. I walked around them. I didn't look back at the check on the floor. I left it there, a piece of paper that meant nothing. When we went back into the courtroom, the atmosphere had shifted. The air was heavier. Mr. Pierce looked agitated. Your Honor, he said, we would like to move for a dismissal of the remaining claims based on... The door at the back of the courtroom opened. Evan walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He was wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt and jeans. He walked past our parents without looking at them. He walked straight to the witness stand. I have a rebuttal witness, Elena said. Evan Reed took the oath. His voice was shaking, but his words were clear. State your name, Elena said. Evan Reed. Mr. Reed, what is your relationship to the defendants? They are my parents. And what is your relationship to the entity known as Reed Harbor Holdings, LLC? I am the organizer, Evan said. He gripped the railing of the witness box. I filed the paperwork in Delaware. Why? Elena asked. Because my parents told me to. Evan said. He looked up. He looked at me. His eyes were full of tears. They told me Nora knew, he said. His voice cracked. They told me Nora had agreed to help the family restructure the debt, but that she was too busy with her divorce to handle the logistics. They said I was helping my sister. Did they tell you the purpose of the transfer? Elena asked. They said it was a temporary bridge loan. Evan said, to stop the foreclosure on the house. Did they tell you they had forged her signature? Evan closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his cheek. No, he whispered. They told me she gave verbal consent. I found out about the signature later, when Nora showed it to me. And when you confronted them? Elena asked. They told me to keep my mouth shut, Evan said. They told me that if I spoke up, I would be betraying the family. He took a deep breath. But they betrayed her first, he said. Silence. Absolute silence. My mother let out a sob, but this time, nobody looked at her. My father sat like a stone statue, staring at the wall. Evan had done it. He had burned the bridge to save me. I wanted to run to him. I wanted to hug him, but I stayed in my seat, tears streaming down my face. Judge Holloway looked at my parents. Her expression was one of pure disgust. "The court has heard enough," she said. She issued the final order. It was swift and brutal. The trust was to be transferred immediately to Brightwell Fiduciary Services. The defendants were permanently enjoined from contacting the trustee. The evidence of forgery and the testimony of Mr. Evan Reed were to be forwarded to the district attorney's office for immediate investigation. It was over. My parents left the courtroom first. They didn't look at me. They didn't look at Evan. They walked out with their heads down, shrinking under the weight of the reality they had tried so hard to ignore. Evan waited for me. We stood in the lobby of the courthouse. "I'm sorry," he said again. "You saved me." I said, "I lost them," he said. I took his hand. "We both lost them a long time ago. Evan, we just finally stopped pretending we hadn't." 3 days later, I received an email from Brightwell Fiduciary Services. Subject: Welcome to your client portal. I sat at my kitchen table in my rental apartment, the same table where I had seen the access denied message. I clicked the link. I created a new password, a complex one that had nothing to do with my birthday or my dog's name or anything my parents could guess. I typed it in. The screen loaded. Balance: $480,000.00. It was there. Safe, locked behind a fortress of encryption and independent oversight. I stared at the number. I expected to feel joy. I expected to feel like popping champagne. Instead, I felt a profound quiet. It was the quiet of a battlefield after the cannons stopped firing. The threat was gone. My future was secure. I could buy the condo. I could breathe. But the cost. I opened the drawer where I kept my grandfather's letter. I pulled it out and read the last line again. "I left you a boundary her parents could never accept, and a test of whether you'd protect yourself." He hadn't just left me money. Money was just fuel. He had left me a choice. He knew that eventually I would have to choose between being their daughter and being myself. I had chosen myself. I poured a cup of coffee and walked to the window. It was raining in Larkspur Harbor. The gray light washed over the streets. My phone buzzed. It was Jillian. "Nora, are you sitting down?" "I am standing." I texted back. "What is it?" "I just saw the MLS listing." Jillian wrote, "Your parents' house in Briar Glen. It is listed for sale. Expedited closing requested." I frowned. They were selling the house. That was expected. The foreclosure was looming. "And Nora," Jillian added, "I asked around. My mom talked to your Aunt Carol. They aren't moving to Florida." "Where are they going?" I asked. "They aren't saying." Jillian wrote, "But they are selling everything, the cars, the furniture, and they are leaving the state. My mom thinks they are trying to outrun the subpoena from the DA." I lowered the phone. They were running. They weren't staying to face the consequences. They weren't staying to fix things with Evan or me. They were liquidating what little they had left and vanishing. They were leaving behind the debt. They were leaving behind the shame. And they were leaving behind their children. I wondered, with a dark certainty, if they would truly disappear, or if, 5 years from now, or 10, I would get a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. A call from a different state, with a new story, a new emergency, a new demand. I looked at my banking app. The green shield icon of Brightwell Fiduciary Services glowed on the screen. Let them run. I thought, I have built my wall, and this time, there is no door. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was an emotional journey for Nora, and I hope you felt every twist and turn along with her. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button for Revenge Stories. We have many more tales of justice and family drama coming your way. What did you think of Nora's decision? Did she do the right thing by cutting them off completely? Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every single one.